On Father's Day, my son gifted his father-in-law a $5,000 rare retro wine while handing me a $9 gas station gift card. I smiled, said nothing, and made one phone call. 4 days later, he called me 82 times, begging, "Dad, please stop." His bank account was completely drained. Before continuing, subscribe to our new channel, where we tell stories about men who take revenge on their insolent children, sons-in-law, and daughters-in-law. My name is Ronald West. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Dallas, Texas, in a house I bought 30 years ago when real estate here still made sense. Spent 43 years as a financial advisor, building portfolios for people who trusted me with their futures. I always believed respect was earned through actions, not demanded through words. Turns out my own son never learned that lesson. My son Justin is 38 now. When he was small, he used to wait by the window every evening, watching for my car. The moment I pulled into the driveway, he'd sprint out, arms wide, shouting, "Dad's home!" Those memories feel like they belong to someone else's life now. The man who lives in my house today, sleeping in my guest room with his wife Kimberly, barely looks at me unless he needs something. Kimberly. She's 35, blonde, surgically perfect, and colder than a January morning in Alaska. She's the daughter of Victor Hamilton, a regional director at one of the big oil companies, the kind of man who measures worth in zeros on a bank statement. When Justin brought her home 5 years ago, I saw the warning signs immediately. The way she glanced around my living room, her smile never quite reaching her eyes, the subtle grimace when I offered her coffee in a regular mug instead of fine china. But Justin was smitten, and I kept my mouth shut. Big mistake. The wedding was lavish. Victor spared no expense for his princess. I contributed what I could, but it was clear from the seating arrangements where I ranked in the new family hierarchy. Somewhere between the caterers and the parking valets. After the honeymoon, things changed fast. Justin started wearing $1,000 suits. He bought a marketing agency with startup capital I helped provide. Though he never mentioned that detail when bragging to Victor's country club friends, he stopped calling me Dad and started using Ronald in that clipped professional tone people use with service workers. They moved into my house 2 years ago. Just temporarily, Justin said, while we renovate our place. That renovation somehow still isn't finished. Now my home feels like I'm the guest. Kimberly rearranged my furniture, replaced my comfortable old couch with something white and uncomfortable that I'm afraid to sit on. She hosts dinner parties where I'm introduced as Justin's father who lives here, with a tone suggesting I'm a charity case. Last month, I walked into my own kitchen to find Kimberly on the phone with her mother. She didn't notice me at first. "I know, Mother, it's difficult," she was saying. "But Justin says we have to be patient. Once Ronald's assets transfer to Justin eventually, we can finally get our own place. A proper place." She saw me then, standing in the doorway. She didn't apologize, didn't even look embarrassed, just smiled sweetly and said, "Ronald, we're out of that expensive coffee you like. Would you mind picking some up?" I minded. But I went and bought the coffee anyway because I'm not a man who makes scenes. I observe. I calculate. I wait for the right moment. That moment started approaching when an invitation appeared on my dresser last week. Embossed cardstock, Victor Hamilton's address in Preston Hollow. "Father's Day celebration lunch," it read. "Family only." I stared at that card for a long time. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have needed an invitation to see my own son on Father's Day. Now I needed formal notice, like a business meeting. I watched Justin prepare for that lunch with the kind of care he used to reserve for job interviews. He spent an hour selecting his outfit, another hour on his hair. Kimberly buzzed around him like an anxious bee, adjusting his collar, checking his watch, spraying him with cologne that cost more than my monthly water bill. "You have it, right?" she asked him 3 times that morning. "The wine?" "It's in the car," Justin assured her. "Temperature controlled, exactly as the seller specified." I didn't ask about the wine. I've learned not to ask questions I won't like the answers to. The drive to Victor's estate took 40 minutes through Dallas traffic. Justin drove his leased BMW, while I followed in my 15-year-old Camry. Kimberly had suggested I could ride with them, but the back seat was occupied by a carefully secured wooden box. The wine, I assumed. More important than dear old Dad. Victor Hamilton's house isn't a house, it's a statement. 7,000 square feet of limestone and glass, sprawling across 2 acres of manicured lawn in one of Dallas's most exclusive neighborhoods. A fountain worthy of Versailles dominated the circular driveway. Through the massive windows, I could see crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my yearly pension. Victor met us at the door, all teeth and cologne and firm handshakes. "Justin, my boy. Kimberly, sweetheart." He noticed me third. "And Ronald, good to see you." The tone said otherwise. We'd met a dozen times, and he'd never bothered to remember that I prefer Ron. The dining room could have seated 20 people comfortably. Today it was just the 4 of us, which somehow made it feel more cavernous. The table was set with china so delicate I was afraid to breathe near it. Victor sat at the head naturally. Justin and Kimberly on his right, me on his left, positioned exactly far enough away to make conversation awkward. Lunch was prepared by Victor's private chef. Multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. I watched Justin laugh at Victor's stories about oil futures and corporate mergers, his face animated in a way I rarely saw anymore. This was the son-in-law Victor wanted. Ambitious, polished, hungry for approval. My son had become a well-dressed stranger. After dessert, Justin stood up. His face had that rehearsed expression he wore before sales pitches. "Victor," he said, "before we finish, I wanted to give you your Father's Day gift." Kimberly beamed. Victor raised his eyebrows with practiced surprise. Justin retrieved the wooden box from the sideboard where a servant had placed it. He set it carefully in front of Victor, handling it like it contained the crown jewels. "I know you're a collector," Justin said. "I spent 3 months tracking this down through private auctions." Victor opened the box. Even from across the table, I could see his eyes widen. "Chateau Margaux 1961, Justin announced. "One of the finest vintages of the 20th century. Only 1,200 bottles were produced. I've collected wine for 20 years. Not the cheap stuff Justin assumed I drank, but legitimate vintages. A 1961 Margaux is spectacular. I owned one once, back in my earning days. Drank it to celebrate my 30th anniversary. That bottle cost me $2,000 15 years ago. Current market value? Somewhere around $5,000. Victor lifted the bottle reverently. "Justin, this is—" I don't know what to say. "You've been so generous with our family," Justin said. The sincerity in his voice sounded almost real. "We wanted to show our appreciation." Kimberly dabbed at her eyes. "Family is everything," she whispered. Victor stood, pulled Justin into a hug. "You're a good man, son. A damn good man." Son. That word hit different when Victor said it to my son. They spent 10 minutes discussing the wine, the terroir, the vintage conditions, the auction house where Justin found it. Victor was genuinely moved. I watched my son bask in his father-in-law's approval, and something inside me went very cold. Then Justin turned to me. "Dad," he said, and I noticed the slight emphasis, the performance of filial duty. "I didn't forget you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small rectangular piece of plastic, slid it across the table to me like a poker chip. A gift card, Shell gas station, the kind they sell at grocery store checkout counters. I picked it up. $9. The price was printed right there on the front. $9. "You're always driving to the golf club, right?" Justin said, smiling. "Gas money. Practical." Kimberly laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "Justin's so thoughtful. He knows you hate frivolous gifts." Victor chuckled. "Practical indeed. My father was the same way. Hated waste." I held that gift card between my fingers. $9. After 43 years building financial security, after helping fund Justin's business, after 2 years of being a quiet ghost in my own home, my Father's Day gift was $9 in gas money. I smiled. "Thank you, Justin. Very thoughtful." I watched his shoulders relax. He'd been worried, I realized. Worried I might make a scene, embarrass him in front of Victor. The smile I gave him cost me nothing, and it bought me everything I needed. I ate the rest of my dessert slowly, savored the expensive coffee, participated in small talk about golf and weather and local politics. I laughed at Victor's jokes. I complimented the meal. I played the role of grateful, undemanding father perfectly. Inside my head, numbers were spinning. calculations I'd been avoiding for months, legal structures I'd put in place 12 years ago when Justin started his business, safety nets that had become invisible chains. That night, I drove home alone. Justin and Kimberly stayed at Victor's estate for drinks on the terrace. I wasn't invited. The $9 gas card sat on my passenger seat, catching streetlight like a piece of evidence. I remember when Justin was 7. His mother, before she passed, helped him save his allowance for weeks to buy me a Father's Day present. He spent $11.43 on a toolbox from the hardware store. Not because I needed tools, but because he'd seen me fixing a fence and wanted to help. He'd wrapped it himself, tape everywhere, his name scrawled on the paper in crayon. That toolbox is still in my garage. That little boy who saved his allowance and wrapped presents with too much tape, he's gone. The man who replaced him just valued our relationship at $9, in front of witnesses, while giving his father-in-law a $5,000 bottle of wine. The really impressive part? He didn't even notice how that looked. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. My house, where I wasn't quite welcome. My investment, quietly waiting for me to die so it could transfer to my ungrateful son. My life's work, reduced to a $9 gas card. Around 10 o'clock, I made a phone call. Gerald Morris, attorney at law, specializing in corporate structure and asset management. We'd worked together for years before my retirement. He answered on the second ring. "Gerald," I said, "remember those documents we structured for Justin's business? The LLC formation, the partnership agreement, the trust arrangements?" "Of course," Gerald said. "Standard family business protection." "Why?" "It's time," I said. "Activate Plan B." There was a pause. Then Gerald's voice came back, careful and professional. "Ronald, are you certain? Once we begin this process, there's no walking it back." I looked at the $9 gift card on my kitchen counter, thought about Justin's face as he presented Victor with that wine, remembered the word son in Victor's mouth. "I'm certain," I said. "Let's begin on Monday. I want everything ready to move by the end of the week." "Understood," Gerald said. "I'll prepare the paperwork tomorrow." I hung up and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. Not expensive bourbon, just the reliable stuff I'd been drinking for 30 years. I sat in my kitchen, in my house, and smiled. Justin thought I was simple, predictable, convenient. He'd learn soon enough that financial advisors don't just manage other people's money. We know every legal trick, every corporate structure, every way to protect assets from ungrateful heirs. My phone buzzed. A text from Justin. "Thanks for coming today. Victor really enjoyed meeting up. See you at home later." Not even a mention of Father's Day. Just confirmation that impressing Victor was the day's real objective. I texted back. "Enjoyed it. Thank you for the thoughtful gift." The next few weeks were going to be very educational, for both of us. The morning after Father's Day, I woke to the sound of Justin and Kimberly celebrating in the kitchen. Their laughter carried through my walls like an unwelcome alarm clock. I lay there listening to them recap yesterday's triumph at Victor's estate. "Did you see Victor's face?" Kimberly's voice was bright with satisfaction. "He actually teared up over that wine." $5,000 well spent," Justin replied. "He mentioned the oil contracts again. Said he wants to introduce me to the procurement team next month." "Meanwhile, your father was perfectly content with his little gas card," she giggled. "I almost felt bad. Almost." I got up, showered, and came downstairs in my bathrobe. They were at my kitchen table, using my coffee maker, eating pastries they'd bought with money from the business I secretly owned. Justin was scrolling through his phone, and I caught a glimpse of his screen before he noticed me. Instagram. A photo of him and Victor holding that wine bottle between them like a trophy. The caption read, "Grateful for family and the father figures who inspire us to be better. Happy Father's Day to the best mentor a son-in-law could ask for." Not a single mention of his actual father. Not one word. "Morning, Ronald," Kimberly said, not looking up from her own phone. "We finished the good coffee. There's some instant in the back cupboard." I made myself instant coffee in my own kitchen and sat at the corner of my own table while they continued planning their future. My future, technically, since it was built on my money. But they didn't know that. They thought they were climbing a ladder they'd built themselves. Justin's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and smiled. "It's Marcus from the agency. Probably that automotive account." He answered with his professional voice, the one that dropped an octave and added gravitas. "Marcus, my man, tell me good news." I sipped my watery instant coffee and watched his face change. The confident smile faltered, then recovered. Sure, we can discuss terms. Let me check my calendar and get back to you." He hung up and immediately started typing. "What did he want?" Kimberly asked. "Just contract details." But his jaw was tight. I'd seen that expression before, back when he was 16 and had wrecked my car but tried to pretend everything was fine. The lies we tell ourselves are always more elaborate than the lies we tell others. Over the next 2 days, I watched them with fresh eyes. Every interaction became data. Every careless word, evidence. They thought I was furniture, harmless and static. So they stopped filtering their conversations around me. I heard Kimberly on the phone with her personal shopper, ordering a $12,000 handbag. "Put it on Justin's card, the business account. It's fine. He won't even notice." I heard Justin promising a client guaranteed results within 30 days. "We have exclusive partnerships with major influencers. Premium package, yes. 75,000 for the quarter." There were no exclusive partnerships. I'd reviewed the agency's contracts during my due diligence. He was selling vapor. I heard them discussing me like I was a problem to be managed. "He's getting older," Justin said while I was supposedly napping upstairs but was actually standing in the hallway. "We should probably talk to him about estate planning soon. Make sure everything's organized properly." "Your father seems pretty healthy to me," Kimberly said. "Annoyingly healthy." "I'm just thinking ahead, being responsible." Responsible? That word from a man who'd never read a single document before signing it. The morning Gerald called to confirm our meeting, I was sitting in my study, going through old photo albums, pictures of Justin at every stage: first day of school, Little League championships, high school graduation. His mother would have been proud of the man he became professionally. She would have been heartbroken by the son he became personally. "Tomorrow at 9?" Gerald asked. "My office in Thanksgiving Tower?" "I'll be there," I said. "Ronald, I want you to think about this carefully overnight. What you're proposing, it's going to hurt him. Badly." He gave me a $9 gas card for Father's Day while giving his father-in-law a $5,000 bottle of wine. I've thought about it enough. Gerald was quiet for a moment. "Bring all the original documents. Partnership agreements, the LLC operating agreement, trust paperwork, everything. We'll need to review the exact language." After hanging up, I continued looking through photos. One caught my attention. Justin at 10, gap-toothed smile, holding a crayon drawing. "Best dad ever," scrawled across the top in wobbly letters. I'd kept it in my office for years. I put the album away and pulled out my file cabinet. The bottom drawer, locked, containing 12 years of legal documents that Justin had signed without reading. He'd trusted me completely back then, trusted that I'd never use these protections against him. Trust is a peculiar thing. It's built slowly, destroyed instantly, and rarely rebuilt. That evening, Justin came home excited. "Landed the automotive account. Marcus just confirmed. 60,000 for a 6-month campaign." Kimberly squealed and hugged him. I knew Victor's connections would pay off. Victor's connections had nothing to do with it, but I let them have their celebration. They opened a bottle of champagne, the expensive kind they kept in my refrigerator. They toasted to their success, their future, their brilliant strategy. I raised my water glass from my chair in the corner. "Congratulations, Justin. You've worked hard." "Thanks, Ronald." He'd stopped calling me Dad weeks ago. I'd noticed, but I'd said nothing. Some disrespects are too useful to correct. They stayed up late planning how to spend money they hadn't earned yet. A vacation to Tuscany. A new car for Kimberly. Maybe a down payment on their own place. Something in the right neighborhood where they could entertain Victor's friends properly. I went to bed early and slept better than I had in months. The next morning I dressed in my best suit. Navy blue, tailored. The one I'd worn to major client presentations back in my working days. Justin noticed as I poured my instant coffee. "Job interview?" he asked, smirking. "Thinking of coming out of retirement?" "Just a meeting downtown," I said. "Business matters." "Good for you, keeping active. Healthy mind, healthy body, right?" He patted my shoulder like I was a golden retriever who'd learned a new trick. I drove to Thanksgiving Tower in downtown Dallas, parked in the underground garage, and took the elevator to the 47th floor. Gerald Morris's law firm occupied the entire level. Walnut paneling, thick carpet, the kind of understated luxury that whispers rather than shouts. Gerald met me in the reception area himself. Mid-50s, silver hair, sharp eyes behind designer frames. We'd worked together on complex estate structures and business formations back when I was still actively advising clients. He specialized in protecting assets from divorces, lawsuits, and entitled family members. "Ronald," he said, shaking my hand, "you look determined." "I've made my decision." His conference room overlooked downtown Dallas, glass and steel stretching toward a cloudless sky. He spread documents across the mahogany table like a general reviewing battle maps. "Let's start with the basics," Gerald said, putting on his reading glasses. 12 years ago, Justin wanted to start a marketing agency. You provided $180,000 in startup capital, but you didn't give it to him. You structured it as an investment. Through West Ventures LLC, I confirmed. "Correct. You own 80% of West Ventures. Justin owns 20%. West Ventures, in turn, owns 75% of Justin's agency, Strategic Marketing Solutions. Justin thinks he owns his agency outright, but legally he's a minority partner." I'd forgotten how precise Gerald was. It was why I'd hired him in the first place. Gerald pulled out another document, this one thicker. The operating agreement for Strategic Marketing Solutions contains several protective clauses. Section 7.3 gives the majority partner, meaning West Ventures, meaning you, the right to assume operational control if certain conditions are met, including, quote, "material financial mismanagement or actions contrary to the company's fiduciary interests." "Can we prove mismanagement?" I asked. "You're a financial advisor, Ronald. You've been quietly reviewing his books for months. What have you found?" I pulled out my own folder. Printouts of bank statements, credit card charges, expense reports. He's using the business account for personal expenses. Kimberly's shopping, their vacations, restaurants. Roughly $43,000 in the last 6 months alone. He's also overpromising to clients and under-delivering. 3 contracts are currently in dispute. Gerald made notes. That's more than sufficient for Section 7.3. We can activate the transfer of control clause. You would become the managing partner with full authority over all business operations and assets. How fast can we move? The agreement requires written notice and a 48-hour response period. We send a certified letter today. Justin receives it tomorrow morning, has until Thursday evening to respond. If he can't prove the allegations are false, which he can't, control transfers automatically on Friday. I looked out at the Dallas skyline. Somewhere out there, Justin was probably in his office, making promises he couldn't keep, spending money that wasn't really his. "There's more," I said. "The house." Gerald pulled out another file. "The residence at 2847 Lakewood Boulevard, purchased 8 years ago for $475,000. Current market value approximately $650,000. The deed is held in the West Family Trust, which you established. Justin is listed as a trust beneficiary, but you're the trustee with full control. He can live there, but he can't sell it, refinance it, or transfer it without your approval as trustee." "He doesn't know that?" "No. You've never exercised your trustee authority, so he's assumed the house is his. But legally, you could revoke his beneficiary status or change the trust terms at any time." This was the part I'd been avoiding thinking about directly. Taking away a man's home felt different than taking away his business. But then I remembered the way Kimberly had talked about my eventual death, the way Justin had handed me that gas card, the contempt in their voices. "What about his personal accounts?" I asked. Gerald consulted another document. "His personal checking and savings are his own. We can't touch those. However, his business accounts, including the operating account where client payments are deposited, are controlled by Strategic Marketing Solutions, which means controlled by West Ventures, which means controlled by you. Once you assume operational control, you can freeze those accounts pending a full financial audit." How much is in the business accounts? As of yesterday's close of business, approximately $217,000. I did the math. Justin's monthly expenses, including the house payment he didn't know I technically owned, Kimberly's shopping, their car leases, everything, probably ran close to $25,000 a month. Without access to the business accounts, they'd burn through personal savings in weeks. I want to proceed, I said. Gerald removed his glasses and looked at me directly. Ronald, I need to make sure you understand what you're doing. This will destroy his business. It will destroy his marriage, most likely. Kimberly doesn't strike me as the type to stick around when the money stops. It will certainly destroy your relationship with your son, possibly permanently. He destroyed our relationship when he decided I was worth $9. I'm just making the consequences visible. All right, then. Gerald began organizing documents into stacks. I'll prepare the notice of material breach and intent to activate Section 7.3. You'll need to sign these authorizations for the trust modifications. And we should discuss your goals here. Do you actually want to run his business, or is this purely punitive? I thought about that. I don't want to run a marketing agency. I want him to understand what he's taken for granted. I want him to feel what it's like to have nothing and no one. So this is temporary? Eventually you'll return control? Maybe, if he learns the lesson. If he becomes the man his mother raised him to be instead of the man Kimberly turned him into. Gerald nodded slowly. Then we structure this as a wake-up call, not a permanent takeover. We activate the control transfer, freeze the accounts, let him scramble. We can build in a path back to partial ownership if he meets certain conditions. Demonstrate fiscal responsibility. Undergo management training, something like that. No, not yet. Right now, I want him to panic. I want him to realize his entire life was built on a foundation I provided and can remove. We spent the next 3 hours going through every document, every clause, every legal mechanism. Gerald drafted the formal notice letter. I signed authorizations. We created a timeline. By the time I left his office, it was mid-afternoon, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Driving home, I stopped at a liquor store and bought myself a proper bottle of bourbon. Not the cheap stuff I'd been drinking to avoid seeming extravagant in my own house. A 20-year-old single barrel that cost $140. I'd earned it. When I got home, Justin and Kimberly were out, probably celebrating that automotive account with an expensive lunch on the business card. I sat in my study, poured myself 2 fingers of that bourbon, and looked at the documents Gerald had given me. Tomorrow morning, a courier would deliver the certified letter to Justin's office. Tomorrow afternoon, his world would start falling apart, and I would watch it happen from the best seat in the house, the home I owned, surrounded by the life I'd built. My phone buzzed. A text from Justin. Staying at Victor's tonight. Kimberly's family dinner thing. Don't wait up. I texted back, enjoy yourself. And I meant it. Enjoy tonight, Justin. Enjoy that dinner, that house, that feeling of belonging to something bigger than yourself. Tomorrow, you'll learn what I've known for 2 years. Belonging is conditional, and conditions can change. I raised my glass to the empty room and smiled. The $9 gas card was still on my kitchen counter. I picked it up, walked to my desk, and tucked it into the frame of that old crayon drawing. Best dad ever. A reminder of what we were and what he chose to become. And that's when I understood exactly how to repay them. Not with anger, not with shouting, not with violence. With the same cold precision they'd used on me. With legal documents and activated clauses and the quiet authority of someone who'd been planning this for longer than they knew. Tomorrow, the lesson would begin. And unlike that $9 gas card, this lesson would be priceless. The courier delivered the certified letter to Strategic Marketing Solutions at precisely 9:15 the next morning. I know because Gerald texted me the confirmation. I was having breakfast at my kitchen table. Real coffee this time. The expensive kind Kimberly had claimed was finished. Funny how a full bag appeared in the back of my pantry once they left for Victor's dinner party. Justin and Kimberly returned home around noon, both in high spirits. They'd stayed overnight at the Hamilton estate, enjoying what Kimberly called proper hospitality. I was reading the newspaper when they walked in, bags from designer stores hanging from their arms. "Ronald," Kimberly said, barely glancing at me. We're having the Montgomerys over for dinner Saturday. I'll need you to make yourself scarce. Maybe visit that golf club you like." "Of course," I said. "Whatever works best." Justin was already on his phone, scrolling through emails. His thumb stopped mid-swipe. I watched his face over the edge of my newspaper. The color drained from his cheeks like someone had opened a tap. "What is this?" he muttered. "What's what?" Kimberly was examining a silk scarf she'd bought. "A letter from Morris, Henderson and Associates. Legal notice about—" He looked up at me, confusion creasing his forehead. "Dad, do you know anything about this?" "Dad? First time in weeks. Interesting how crisis restores old habits. Know about what?" I turned the page of my newspaper calmly. "It says there's been a material breach of our partnership agreement, that the business accounts are being frozen pending review, that I need to appear at their offices by Thursday at 5 for a formal hearing." "Partnership agreement?" Kimberly's voice went sharp. "What partnership agreement?" Justin's hands were shaking slightly as he held his phone. "This doesn't make sense. We don't have partners. It's my company." I folded my newspaper and stood up. "Justin, do you remember when you started your agency 12 years ago? All those documents I had you sign? The LLC formation, the operating agreements, the business structure?" "Yeah, you said it was standard stuff. Legal protection." "It was legal protection for me. I invested $180,000 in your startup through West Ventures LLC, which I own. West Ventures owns 75% of your agency. You own 25%. The operating agreement gives me, as majority partner, the right to assume control if I determine there's been financial mismanagement." The silence that followed was beautiful. Justin's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Kimberly's designer bag slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. "That's—" Justin's voice cracked. "That's not possible. You gave me that money as a gift. I invested that money as a business decision and based on $43,000 in personal expenses charged to business accounts over the last 6 months. I've determined you're not managing my investment responsibly." "You're lying." Kimberly found her voice shrill and panicked. "This is some kind of joke." "The lawyers at Morris, Henderson and Associates don't joke. Neither do I. You have until Thursday to respond to the notice. I suggest you read those documents you signed very carefully, especially Section 7.3. Justin's phone started ringing. He looked at the screen. "It's the bank." "You should probably answer that," I said. He did, walking into the other room. I could hear his voice rising from confused to desperate. "What do you mean the account is frozen? On whose authority? This is my business account." Kimberly stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What have you done?" "I activated a clause in a legal contract that your husband signed without reading. Everything is documented. Everything is legal. Everything is binding. You can't do this. Victor will—" "Victor will what? Violate federal banking laws to unfreeze accounts he has no legal claim to?" "I don't think so. But by all means, call him. I'm sure he'll be very interested to learn how his son-in-law runs a business." Justin came back into the room, his face now completely white. "They won't release any funds. They said all business operations are suspended pending resolution of a partnership dispute. Dad, please, I have payroll due tomorrow. I have client payments that need to go out. You have a legal hearing on Thursday at 5. I suggest you prepare for it." I picked up my newspaper and walked toward my study. Behind me, I heard Kimberly's voice, no longer sugary and condescending, now razor-sharp with rage. "How could you be so stupid? You signed documents without reading them. With your own father? He's my father. I trusted him." "Well, that was clearly a mistake." I closed my study door and sat at my desk. My phone buzzed. A text from Gerald. "Letter received and confirmed. Bank freeze activated. He's scrambling." I texted back. "I noticed." The house erupted into chaos around me. Doors slamming. Voices rising. Phone calls to lawyers who would all say the same thing. The documents are legal, binding, and ironclad. I'd made sure of that 12 years ago when I'd paid Gerald top dollar to structure everything perfectly. My phone rang. Justin. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Again. By the time evening arrived, I had 11 missed calls and 7 voicemails. I listened to them in order, enjoying the progression. Voicemail 1. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Voicemail 4. This isn't funny. You're destroying my business. People depend on me. Please. Voicemail 7. I'm sorry, okay? Whatever I did, I'm sorry. Just please stop this. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I poured myself another glass of that good bourbon and watched the sunset through my study window. Tomorrow would be even more interesting. The next morning, I woke to find Justin already gone. Kimberly sat at the kitchen table, her perfect makeup streaked from crying, scrolling frantically through her phone. He's at the office, she said without looking up, trying to salvage what he can. His employees are panicking. Clients are asking questions. I imagine they are, I said, making my coffee. Why are you doing this? What do you want? I turned to look at her. Really look at her. The woman who'd systematically turned my son against me, who'd spent 2 years treating me like an inconvenient burden in my own home, who'd waited for me to die so she could have a proper place. I want exactly what I received on Father's Day, $9 worth of consideration, which coincidentally is about what you and Justin have shown me for the past 5 years. Thursday arrived like a reckoning day. I dressed carefully that morning, the same navy suit I'd worn to Gerald's office. Justin had been sleeping at the office for 2 nights, according to Kimberly, trying to manage the crisis. She'd stopped speaking to me entirely, which made the house pleasantly quiet. I arrived at Morris Henderson and Associates at 4:45. Gerald met me in the lobby with a thin smile. He hired Clayton Brooks, Gerald said. Good lawyer, expensive, won't matter. Will Justin make it on time? He's already here. Arrived an hour ago. Brought his wife and father-in-law. Victor Hamilton. This was going to be entertaining. The conference room was exactly as I remembered it. Justin sat on one side of the table, flanked by a sharp-looking attorney in his 40s, and Kimberly, who wore dark sunglasses indoors. Victor Hamilton sat next to her, his expensive suit and overbearing presence filling the space. When I walked in, Justin's face did something complicated. Hope, anger, desperation, all fighting for dominance. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, wrinkled shirt. Dad? He started. Mr. West? His attorney interrupted smoothly. I'm Clayton Brooks. I represent your son in this matter. I've reviewed the partnership agreements, and while they're technically valid, I believe we can negotiate a reasonable... There's nothing to negotiate, Gerald said, sitting next to me. Mr. Ronald West activated a clause that was agreed upon and signed 12 years ago. Strategic Marketing Solutions is now under his operational control as majority partner. My client was not adequately informed of the implications when he signed. Your client is a business owner who signed legal documents without reading them. That's not fraud. That's negligence. Victor Hamilton leaned forward. Ronald, isn't it? I think we can all agree this is a family matter that's gotten out of hand. Surely there's a way to resolve this that doesn't destroy a young man's livelihood. I looked at Victor with new eyes. Last time I'd seen him at his estate, he'd laughed when Justin gave me a $9 gas card. Now he wanted to play peacemaker. Mr. Hamilton, I said, this is a business matter between partners. Family considerations ended when your son-in-law valued me at $9 on Father's Day while giving you a $5,000 bottle of wine. Victor's expression flickered. Good. He remembered. Justin's attorney cleared his throat. Mr. West, my client is prepared to offer restitution for any personal expenses that were inappropriately charged to business accounts. We can establish a repayment plan. I don't want repayment, I said. I want control of my investment. Justin finally spoke, his voice cracking. The credit line is frozen. Payroll didn't go out yesterday. My employees are threatening to quit. Clients are canceling contracts. In 3 days, you've destroyed everything I built. Everything I built, I corrected, with my money, under my legal ownership, which you would have known if you'd read the documents you signed. I trusted you, and I trusted you to be a decent son. We were both disappointed. Kimberly pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and puffy. You're doing this because of a Father's Day gift? That's insane. No, Mrs. West, I'm doing this because I spent 12 years watching my son become someone I don't recognize. Someone who lives in my house, spends my money, and treats me like an inconvenient obstacle. The gift was simply the final data point. I didn't realize, Justin started. You didn't realize I had feelings. Didn't realize I could hear you and Kimberly discussing my eventual death like it was an estate sale. Didn't realize that calling me Ronald instead of Dad and making me drink instant coffee in my own kitchen might be hurtful. The room went very quiet. Victor Hamilton cleared his throat. Perhaps we could discuss a buyout option. I'm prepared to help Justin purchase your shares at a fair market. The house, Gerald interrupted, pulling out another document. Let's discuss 2847 Lakewood Boulevard. Justin's attorney tensed. What about it? It's held in the West Family Trust, established 8 years ago. Mr. Ronald West is the trustee. Justin West is listed as a beneficiary, but the trust specifically states that beneficiary status can be revoked or modified at the trustee's discretion. I watched Justin's face as he understood. First confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like vertigo. The house isn't mine? The house is the trust's, Gerald said. Your father has allowed you to live there and make mortgage payments, but you don't own it. You can't sell it. You can't refinance it. You can't use it as collateral. And if your father chooses, he can revoke your beneficiary status entirely. Kimberly made a sound like a wounded animal. That's our home. It's my trust property, I said. Clayton Brooks looked genuinely uncomfortable now. Mr. West, these structures are unusually comprehensive. I was a financial advisor for 43 years, I said. I know how to protect assets. Justin put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. I watched my son, the man who'd given me a $9 gas card, and laughed, completely break down in a conference room full of lawyers. Victor Hamilton stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Kimberly, we're leaving. Daddy, please, Kimberly begged. Can't you help us? Victor looked at his daughter, then at Justin, then at me. I saw the calculation in his eyes. This was business. Justin had proven himself foolish, negligent, easily manipulated. Victor Hamilton didn't invest in losers. This is your husband's mess, Victor said coldly. You married him. You deal with it. He walked out without looking back. Kimberly's face crumpled. She ran after her father, calling his name. We sat in silence. Justin, his attorney, Gerald, and me. Finally, Clayton Brooks spoke. Mr. West, what exactly do you want from this? I looked at Justin, really looked at him. My son, broken and humiliated, understanding for perhaps the first time what it felt like to have nothing. I want him to start over, I said. I want him to understand the value of what he had. And I want him to earn his way back, not because someone handed it to him, but because he proved he deserved it. Dad, Justin whispered, please. My phone buzzed, a text from Gerald's assistant. Business account balance now 0 after automated clearinghouse transactions. Personal payroll accounts insufficient. I showed Justin my phone. Your employees won't get paid this week. Your clients are receiving notifications about change in management. Your business, as you knew it, no longer exists. I'm sorry. Tears ran down his face. I'm so sorry. I know, I said, but sorry doesn't rebuild what you destroyed. Sorry is just a word. Now comes the hard part. Now you prove whether you can become someone worth forgiving. I stood up to leave. Gerald gathered his documents. Mr. West, Clayton Brooks called after me. What happens now? I paused at the door. Now? Justin learns to live on $9 worth of consideration. Seems fair, doesn't it? I walked out, leaving my son sobbing in a conference room, his lawyer helpless beside him, his wife chasing after her disappointed father, and his entire world in ruins. The elevator ride down felt like floating. The next 2 weeks were instructive. Justin called 82 times over the course of those first 48 hours after the meeting. I counted. His voicemails evolved like a case study in the 5 stages of grief, compressed into digital audio files. Messages 1 through 15. Anger. How could you do this? This is my life, my business. You can't just take it. Messages 16 through 40. Bargaining. Please, Dad, we can work this out. I'll pay you back every cent. Just unfreeze the accounts. Messages 41 through 67. Desperation. The employees are leaving. Clients are threatening lawsuits. Please, I'm begging you. Messages 68 through 82. Defeat. Dad, please, I don't know what else to do. I answered exactly once, on call number 53. Justin, I said calmly, I'm simply taking back what was always mine. You gave me $9 for Father's Day. I'm taking my investment back. Seems proportional. The line went quiet. Then, this is about the gas card? No, son. This is about everything the gas card represented. The disrespect, the contempt, the assumption that I'd always be there, no matter how you treated me. You valued our relationship at $9. Now you're learning what that really means. I hung up and blocked his number for 3 days. Through Gerald, I monitored the fallout. Strategic marketing solutions hemorrhaged employees. The automotive account Justin had celebrated so proudly canceled within 72 hours. The clients wanted stability, not a company in legal chaos. By the end of the first week, 8 of his 12 employees had resigned. By the end of the second, all but 2 were gone. Kimberly, according to Gerald's sources, was staying with her parents. Or trying to. Victor Hamilton had made it clear that while she was welcome, Justin was not. The marriage was fracturing in real time, exactly as I'd predicted. I spent those 2 weeks doing exactly what I'd told Gerald I would. I played golf at Brookhaven Country Club. I tasted wines from my collection. I read books in my study, in my house, drinking my expensive coffee without anyone commenting on the waste. On a Wednesday afternoon in early summer, I received a text from an unknown number. Dad, please, can we meet? Just to talk. No lawyers, just us. I'm begging you. I stared at that message for a long time. The word Dad stood out, not Ronald. Dad. I texted back, Baker's Cafe, downtown, tomorrow at 2. The next day, I arrived 15 minutes early and took a booth by the window. I ordered coffee and waited. Justin arrived exactly on time, which surprised me. Punctuality had never been his strength. He looked terrible. The well-groomed businessman I'd seen at Victor's estate was gone. This man wore jeans and a wrinkled button-down. His hair needed cutting. His face was gaunt, shadows under his eyes suggesting he wasn't sleeping. He'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. He slid into the booth across from me and didn't say anything at first, just stared at his hands on the table. Coffee? I asked. He shook his head. We sat in silence. I sipped my coffee and watched him wrestle with whatever he'd come here to say. Finally, he looked up. I'm sorry, he said. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying recently. I know that's not enough. I know sorry is just a word, but I need you to know I mean it. I'm genuinely sorry. For what, specifically? For everything. For the gas card. For treating you like you were less than. For letting Kimberly turn me into someone who'd do that to his own father. For not reading the documents. For being arrogant and stupid and ungrateful. I nodded slowly. That's a good start. Is there any way to fix this? His eyes were desperate. Any way at all? I'll do anything. Sign anything. Agree to anything. Just please give me a chance to rebuild. Rebuild what? The business you ran into the ground. The marriage that was built on status and money. The relationship with me that you valued at $9? He flinched. I deserve that. Yes, you do. I set down my coffee cup. Justin, I spent 43 years building a reputation and a life. I advised clients through market crashes, recessions, divorces, deaths. I protected people's futures because that's what I was good at. And you? You spent $9 on me for Father's Day while giving your father-in-law a $5,000 bottle of wine. That showed me your priorities. That showed me your real values. I know. I was trying to impress Victor. I thought if he saw me as successful, as generous, he'd help with business connections. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. Victor abandoned you the second you stopped being useful. Did you notice that? The moment he saw you were vulnerable, he walked away. Because that's who Victor Hamilton is. He invests in winners and drops losers. And you chose to model yourself after him instead of your own father. Justin's face crumpled. I know. I see that now. When everything fell apart, I called him, begged him for help. He told me I was an embarrassment to Kimberly, that I'd proven myself incompetent, that real men don't cry to their father-in-laws. Despite everything, I felt a small twist of sympathy. Small, but present. Where's Kimberly now? I asked. At her parents' house. She won't take my calls. Her lawyer sent me preliminary divorce papers yesterday. She wants the house, the cars, everything. I had to explain that we don't actually own anything, that it's all in trusts and LLCs controlled by you. How did that conversation go? She called me an idiot. She said she never should have married someone without his own money. She said, he stopped, swallowed hard. She said she was just waiting for you to die so we could have a real life. There it was, the truth, finally spoken out loud between us. And what did you say to that? Nothing, because part of me knew she was right. Part of me had been thinking the same thing, not wanting you to die, but waiting, assuming, taking for granted that eventually everything would transfer to me, and I'd finally be free from needing anyone. The honesty was brutal, also refreshing. Justin, I said carefully, what do you want from this meeting? I want my father back, and if there's any way, any possibility, I want a chance to prove I can be better. Not the business, necessarily, just a chance. I studied him. The desperation was real. But was the change? Here's what I'm willing to offer, I said. One chance. One. You can buy back 25% of Strategic Marketing Solutions for $220,000 cash. 30 days from today, not a day more. His eyes widened. 220,000? Dad, I don't have anywhere near that. The business accounts are frozen. My personal savings are maybe 15,000. Kimberly maxed out the credit cards before she left. I can't. Then you'll need to figure it out. Sell your car. Sell Kimberly's car. Sell the jewelry, the watches, everything you bought with money you didn't really earn. Get a job. Work. Scrape. Struggle. Learn what it means to build something from nothing. In 30 days? That's impossible. Is it? Or is it just hard? There's a difference, Justin. You've spent 12 years having everything handed to you. Now you'll spend 30 days earning back a fraction of what you lost. If you can do it, we'll talk about the rest. If you can't, you lose everything permanently. He was quiet for a long moment. Then 25% for $220,000. That values the whole business at $880,000. It was worth more before you destroyed it. That's the current valuation based on actual assets and remaining contracts. Take it or leave it. And if I somehow get the money, what then? Then you own 25%. I own 75%. You work under my supervision. You rebuild. Slowly, the right way. And maybe, if you prove yourself over years, not weeks, we revisit the arrangement. Years? Justin, you destroyed 12 years of trust in 12 months. Did you think you'd earn it back in 12 days? He shook his head slowly. No, I guess not. He looked up at me with something like hope mixed with fear. 30 days, $220,000. Is that really possible? I don't know. That's for you to figure out. But I'll tell you this. If you do it, if you actually find a way, I'll know you're serious. I'll know this wasn't just another performance. I stood up, threw a 20 on the table for the coffee. The clock starts now, 30 days. August 15th. If you can't make it happen, the business gets liquidated and you get nothing. Good luck, son. You're going to need it. I walked out of that cafe, leaving Justin sitting alone in the booth, staring at the impossible task I'd just set before him, finally understanding what it meant to start from zero. The next week was chaos observed from a comfortable distance. Through Gerald and a few discreet sources, I watched Justin scramble like a man trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. First, he sold his BMW. The lease buyout plus sale netted him $23,000. Kimberly's leased Mercedes, another $19,000 after he negotiated with the dealership and paid early termination fees. The Rolex watch he'd bought to impress Victor, $12,000 at a pawn shop, well below its retail value. Kimberly's jewelry collection, which she'd left behind in her rush to move back to her parents, another $31,000, though half of it was technically still being paid off on credit cards. By the end of the first week, Justin had scraped together $87,000. Respectable. Also, nowhere near enough. He tried Victor first, of course. According to my sources, that conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. Victor's exact words were, "I don't invest in losers, and I certainly don't bail out fools. You made your bed. Lie in it." Then Justin tried banks. 4 loan applications, 4 rejections. Without assets, without a functioning business, without collateral. He was a bad risk. The financial system he'd taken for granted suddenly had no use for him. He tried former clients. I heard about this through a friend at the country club whose company had used Justin's agency. He called me asking for a bridge loan, my friend said over golf. Promised he'd pay it back triple when he got his business back. I told him that wasn't how business worked. What did he say? He cried. Actually cried on the phone. I felt bad, but Ronald, I'm not a charity. I watched all of this unfold with clinical detachment. This was the education I'd wanted Justin to receive. The world doesn't reward desperation. It rewards value. Kimberly, meanwhile, was waging her own campaign. She hired a divorce attorney who sent increasingly aggressive letters demanding asset division. Each letter got the same response from Gerald. The assets in question are held in trust and LLC structures that Mr. Justin West does not control. Mrs. West is entitled to 50% of nothing. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks into Justin's scramble, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Kimberly standing there, dressed immaculately despite her circumstances. Her armor. "We need to talk," she said. I stepped aside to let her in. She walked into my living room, the one she'd redecorated, and stood there like she owned the place. Old habits. "You're destroying him," she said without preamble. "I'm teaching him," I corrected. "There's a difference. This is cruel. He's selling everything, working 2 jobs. He got hired at a restaurant washing dishes and at a call center during the day. He's broken. Good. Broken things can be rebuilt stronger. Entitled things just stay entitled. I want you to stop this. Give him the business back. Let us move on." "Us?" I raised an eyebrow. "I heard you filed for divorce." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was angry. Hurt. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did. You meant every word. You married Justin because you thought he was successful. You stayed with him because you thought you'd eventually get my money when I died. Now that neither is true, you're leaving. That's fine. That's honest, at least. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know you spent $12,000 on a handbag using his business account. I know you told your mother you were waiting for me to die. I know you encouraged Justin to treat me like an inconvenient burden. I know enough." Her perfect composure cracked. "Fine. Yes, I wanted the money. I wanted the house. I wanted the life we were supposed to have. Is that so wrong?" "No, it's just honest. But here's the thing, Kimberly. You never had that life. You had a life I funded. Justin's success was my investment. His house was my trust. His business was my LLC. None of it was real. It was all borrowed, and now the loan's been called. So what? You're just going to watch him suffer? I'm watching him learn. There's a difference. If he can raise $220,000 in 30 days, he gets a chance to rebuild. If he can't, he loses everything. That's more generous than the $9 he gave me." She stared at me, and for a moment I saw past the makeup and the designer clothes to the scared young woman underneath. She'd bet everything on a horse that fell, and now she had nothing. "I'm leaving him," she said quietly. "The divorce is proceeding. My father won't let me come back home permanently, not as a failure. I'm moving to Austin, starting over." "Good luck," I said, and I meant it. She turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About the Father's Day thing, about all of it. We were wrong. I was wrong. Apology noted." She left, and I never saw her again. Meanwhile, Justin's deadline was approaching with mathematical certainty. August 15th was 3 weeks away, then 2 weeks, then 10 days. He'd stopped calling me, stopped begging. He was focused entirely on the impossible task. He sold furniture, sold his designer clothes, sold his golf clubs, his ski equipment, everything he owned that had resale value. Every dollar went into a dedicated account. By the beginning of August, he'd reached $112,000. Better, still not enough. Then he did something I didn't expect. He started a GoFundMe. "Help Me Save My Family Business," it was titled. The description was brutally honest. He explained everything: the $9 gas card, his arrogance, his failure, his father's ultimatum. He laid himself bare publicly. It raised $11,000, most of it in donations under $50. People who didn't know him but appreciated the honesty. Gerald called me on August 8th. He's at 123,000. 1 week left. He's not going to make it. Probably not, I agreed. What happens then? Then he learns a different lesson, that sometimes you fail, that some consequences are permanent, that life isn't fair and doesn't care about your effort. You sound almost disappointed. I was, a little. I'd been curious to see if he could actually do it. The human part of me, the father part, wanted him to succeed. The teacher part knew the lesson worked either way. On August 13th, 48 hours before the deadline, Justin showed up at my door again. He looked like he'd aged a decade, thin, exhausted, worn down to nothing. I can't do it, he said simply. I've sold everything. I've worked every hour I can. I've begged everyone I know. I've got $127,000. I'm 93,000 short. I failed. I looked at my son standing on my porch, admitting defeat. Come inside, I said. We sat in my kitchen. I made coffee. Real coffee, the expensive kind. I poured him a cup. He wrapped his hands around the mug like it was a lifeline. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I watched him, this broken version of my son, and felt something shift inside me. Tell me about the last 2 months, I said. He looked up surprised. What? The last 2 months. What did you learn? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I learned I'm not as smart as I thought. I learned that people who smile at you when you're successful disappear when you're not. I learned that washing dishes is harder than running a marketing campaign. I learned that $127,000 is a lot of money and also nowhere near enough. What else? I learned that Kimberly never loved me. She loved what I represented. Status, money, access to a certain kind of life. When that disappeared, so did she. He paused. I learned that Victor Hamilton is exactly what you tried to warn me about. He measures people in dollars and drops them when they're not profitable. And I learned that I was the worst kind of fool. The kind who had everything and didn't value it until it was gone. The kind who treated his father like furniture while treating a stranger like royalty. The kind who thought $9 was an appropriate gift for the man who funded his entire life. I sipped my coffee and waited. Dad, he said, and his voice broke on the word. I know I failed your test. I know I didn't raise the money. I know what that means. But I need you to know something. This wasn't about the money. Not really. These last 2 months, working those jobs, selling everything, struggling, that was the first time in 12 years I felt like I actually earned something. The $127,000 I raised, that's mine. I worked for every cent, and even though it's not enough, that's the most valuable thing I've ever owned. Something in his voice made me look at him differently. The entitlement was gone. The arrogance was gone. The man sitting across from me wasn't the same man who'd handed me a $9 gas card. What would you do differently? I asked. If you could go back to Father's Day, what would you change? Everything, he said immediately. I'd tell Victor I couldn't attend because I had plans with my father. I'd take you to that seafood place you like. I'd give you something that actually meant something. Not because it was expensive, but because it showed I knew you. I'd listen when you talked instead of waiting for my turn to speak. I'd read the documents before signing them. I'd ask questions. I'd be a son instead of an investor looking for returns. Why didn't you do those things then? Because I thought I had time. Because I thought you'd always be there. Because I was so focused on impressing people who didn't matter that I ignored the person who did. Tears ran down his face, and he didn't bother wiping them away. I'm not asking for the business back, Dad. I'm asking for something harder. I'm asking if there's any way ever that you could forgive me. Not today, not soon, but someday. Because I can live without the money. I can't live knowing I destroyed the only relationship that actually mattered. I set down my coffee cup and looked at the man who was my son. 38 years old, sitting in his father's kitchen, finally understanding what he'd lost. The deadline is in 2 days, I said. What's your plan? He shook his head. I don't have one. I can't raise $93,000 in 48 hours. It's mathematically impossible. So I guess I'll keep the $127,000, use it to start over somewhere else. Get a real job. Build something small, something I can actually manage. Try to become someone who deserves a second chance, even if I never get one. I stood up and walked to my study. Justin stayed in the kitchen, probably thinking I was getting paperwork to officially end everything. I pulled open my desk drawer and removed a document I'd prepared 3 weeks ago, returned to the kitchen and placed it in front of him. "What's this?" he asked. "Read it." He did, his eyes moving across the page, then stopping, going back, reading again. His hands started shaking. "This says you're transferring 40% of strategic marketing solutions to me. Not 25%, 40%. For free. No buyback required. That's correct? I don't understand. Justin, this was never about the money. It was never about the business. It was about whether you could learn the lesson, whether you could transform from someone who thought he was entitled to everything into someone who understood he had to earn respect. But I failed. I didn't raise the money. You raised $127,000 in 6 weeks while working 2 jobs and selling everything you owned. You did something I wasn't sure you were capable of. You tried, actually tried. You didn't make excuses. You didn't quit. You faced the consequences of your actions head on. So the deadline was a test, not of your ability to raise money, but of your character. Would you give up? Would you blame me? Would you find shortcuts? Or would you do the hard work, even knowing you'd probably fail? I pushed the document toward him. You did the work. You earned this. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet. There are conditions. He nodded, waiting. You own 40%. I own 60%. For the next 2 years, you work under a professional business manager I'll hire. You learn proper financial management. You rebuild the client base legitimately. No overselling, no overpromising. You live within your means. You prove you can run a business responsibly. Yes, absolutely. Whatever you want. One more thing. The house. His face fell. Right. The house. I pulled out another document. The West Family Trust is being modified. You're now the primary beneficiary, with ownership transferring to you fully. But the mortgage is yours to pay. No trust fund bailout. You make the payments or you lose it. He stared at the papers like they might disappear. Why? After everything I did, why are you giving me this? Because you're my son. Because watching you work 2 jobs and sell everything you owned showed me you could change. Because the point was never to destroy you. It was to rebuild you into someone better. 2 days later, on the afternoon of the deadline that no longer mattered, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I sent invitations to a dinner party at my house. 4 people, Justin, Kimberly, Victor Hamilton, and Gerald Morris, as my attorney and witness. Kimberly tried to decline. I made it clear through Gerald that her attendance was required for final divorce settlement discussions. Victor initially refused until I mentioned there were business matters that concerned him directly. Curiosity brought him. They arrived separately, nobody wanting to acknowledge any connection to the others. I'd had the dining room catered by the same company that had served Victor's Father's Day lunch. A small detail, but I appreciated the symmetry. Justin arrived first, still looking worn but cleaner, more put together. He'd used some of his saved money to buy a decent suit. Kimberly came next, armor perfect in designer clothes I knew she'd gotten from her mother's closet. Victor arrived exactly on time, making an entrance like he owned the place. We gathered in my dining room, the one Kimberly had redecorated. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "Thank you all for coming," I said, standing at the head of my table. "I know this is unusual, but there are matters to settle." Victor cut in. "Ronald, I appreciate the dinner, but I'm a busy man. What's this about?" "Patience, Victor. We're waiting for one more person." Gerald arrived moments later, carrying his briefcase. He took the empty seat, nodded at everyone, and pulled out documents. "Now then," I said, "let's begin. Justin, you received the transfer documents?" "Yes, sir." Kimberly's head snapped toward him. "Transfer documents?" "I'm giving Justin 40% ownership of Strategic Marketing Solutions, along with full ownership of the house at Lakewood Boulevard." The silence was spectacular. Kimberly's mouth opened and closed like she'd forgotten how words worked. Victor's expression cycled through confusion, calculation, and barely concealed shock. "You're giving it back?" Kimberly finally managed. "After everything?" "Not giving it back. Giving him a chance he earned. There's a difference. She turned to Justin. You have the business back? The house? 40% of the business, Justin corrected quietly, and the house comes with the mortgage I have to pay. I watched Kimberly's face as she did the math. A 40% stake in a decimated marketing agency and a house with payments. Nothing like the empire she'd thought she'd married into. Nothing like what she'd been waiting to inherit when I died. How much is 40% worth? She asked, the divorce calculations already running. In the current state, maybe 150,000, Gerald said. The business lost most of its clients and employees. It'll take years to rebuild. Her face collapsed. All her planning, all her manipulation, all her patient waiting, reduced to a seventh of what she'd divorced Justin to escape. However, Gerald continued, Mrs. West, your divorce settlement entitles you to 50% of marital assets as of the filing date, which was when the business was worth zero and the house was in a trust. So your settlement is 50% of nothing. You can either accept that, or we can go to court and spend whatever you might get on legal fees. The color drained from her face. That's not fair. Fair? I let the word hang in the air. You spent 2 years in my house, spending my money, waiting for me to die, treating me like an inconvenience. You encouraged my son to treat me the same way. You valued your relationship with me so little that you laughed when Justin gave me a $9 gas card, and you think this isn't fair? She had nothing to say to that. I turned to Victor. And you raised your daughter to value money over people. You measured my son's worth by the price of a wine bottle. You abandoned your own daughter the moment things got difficult, because winners don't associate with losers. Victor's jaw tightened. I don't need lectures from... Yes, you do. You sat at your dinner table and watched my son give me $9 while praising him for giving you $5,000. You laughed. You made it clear where you thought I ranked. Now look at the result. Your daughter is getting divorced and walking away with nothing because she learned your values too well. She chose status over substance, just like you taught her. Victor stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't. The door's right there. Leave, like you left your daughter when she needed you. Show everyone here exactly who you are. He stood there, face red, pride warring with the public exposure of his character. Slowly, he sat back down. Because men like Victor Hamilton cared deeply about appearances, and walking out would confirm everything I'd said. Justin, I said, turning to my son, stand up. He did, uncertain. Tell them what you learned. He looked at me, then at Kimberly, then at Victor. When he spoke, his voice was steady. I learned that I spent 5 years becoming someone I despised, someone who measured relationships in dollars, someone who thought success meant impressing people who didn't actually care about me. I learned that the man I should have been learning from was the one I treated worst. He looked at Kimberly. I'm sorry I wasn't a better husband, but honestly, we were never really married. We were two people using each other. You wanted money and status. I wanted validation. Neither of us wanted a real partnership. He looked at Victor. And you, sir, taught me what kind of man I never want to be. Someone who abandons family when they're not useful. Someone who measures worth in wine bottles. Someone who mistakes wealth for wisdom. Finally, he looked at me. Dad, I know I can't undo the last 5 years, but I'm going to spend the next 5 and the 5 after that, proving I learned the lesson. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I nodded. Sit down. I pulled out the final document, the one I'd been saving. Kimberly, this is your divorce settlement. You get the car you arrived in, which is registered in your name. You get your personal belongings. You get nothing else. Sign it or see me in court. She signed with shaking hands. Victor, you're no longer welcome in my home. You used my son for your own ego, and you failed your daughter by teaching her that money matters more than character. I don't know what kind of relationship you'll have with Kimberly going forward, but you've lost any connection to Justin. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out without a word. Kimberly followed, moving like a sleepwalker. The door closed behind them. Justin and I sat alone at my dining room table. Gerald quietly excused himself, leaving us to the silence. So what happens now? Justin asked. Now? You start working. The business won't rebuild itself. You've got a professional manager starting Monday. You'll work under her, learn the right way to do things, and prove you can be trusted. I won't let you down. See that you don't. This is your last chance, Justin. There won't be another. I know. A month later, I took Justin to Brookhaven Country Club for 9 holes of golf. He'd never been interested in golf before, said it was too slow, too old-fashioned. Now he carried his own clubs, the cheap set he'd bought second-hand, and played with focus and patience. On the 7th hole, after a decent drive, he turned to me. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For loving me enough to let me fail. For caring enough to teach me the hard way. For being the father I didn't deserve but desperately needed." I lined up my shot. "You're welcome. Now watch your form." "You're still slicing on the backswing." We played the rest of the round in comfortable silence, father and son, finally on the same page after years of being in different books. The $9 gas card was still on my desk at home, tucked into that old crayon drawing. A reminder of where we'd been and how far we'd come. Justice, I'd learned, isn't about revenge. It's about teaching people the value of what they had before they lost it. It's about transformation, not destruction. It's about giving someone the chance to become who they should have been all along. Justin learned that lesson. It cost him everything to understand it, but he understood it. And that, finally, was worth more than any amount of money. If you like this story, subscribe to our new channel and listen to a few stories there. You can find the link to it in the collaboration or description of this video, or in the comments. Subscribe so you don't lose us, because this channel may soon cease to exist.